Okay, I think we're running. How you doing there, Worldview Seminar gurus? That would be you. It's Dr. Bruce. Hope you're doing all right. Welcome to my humble abode once again. It's actually Sunday evening, and I have a weirdly busy schedule tomorrow, so I'm not going to be able to record tomorrow morning. So I'm at least till later. So I'm going to record this one on Sunday evening and post it, but this is for Monday, April 6th, and our topic is secular existentialism in pop culture, as you can see with the slide here. Just a business stuff to make sure that we're on the same page. So I think you're all aware, and the updated syllabus still reflects this. There is nothing scheduled for Friday because it's Good Friday, the 10th of April. So I'm going to be posting for the topics we're doing on Monday, tomorrow, April 6th, and also for Wednesday, April 8th, we'll be dealing with monism, Eastern pantheism on Wednesday for that class on the 8th. And so all the assignments are still as they've been listed on the updated online or distance learning syllabus. So I won't be posting something for Friday because it's Good Friday. So I'll post for Monday, for Wednesday, and then I will post again for the following Monday's class session, which would be the 13th of April. Just to make sure we're on the same page. I've been getting a bunch of emails from you guys, a lot of film reviews, and several of the 5-minute videos from students. So the student videos for Monday, I'm not going to steal their thunder. So I've already watched those who've been submitted to me anyway, and they're a blast. I love what you guys are, what you're all doing with these videos. I know it was just really shook things up. I would prefer, obviously, that we were all together. I would have loved to keep the collaborative element, but because there were both some possible technical limitations I wanted to avoid, and hiccups, and also because just the collaborative process right now could work for many students, but might not work for all. And so that's why we kind of went this route. Not an easy decision, but I think a necessary one in this case. And yet, even though I would love to have you guys doing things as a collaborative group, that would be ideal, I have really enjoyed the 5-minute videos that you've all done for me so far. I appreciate the work you put in. Remember, I won't mention any names, but remember that these submissions are to be 5 minutes apiece. Okay, I don't mind if you happen to go over by 2 minutes or something, it's not the end of the world, but please try to keep them at 5 minutes. Please don't make them much longer than that. So the original design when you guys were all in your collaborative groups still was that they would be 18 to 22 minutes, right? That was the time frame. That is no longer the case. You are now, if you're still doing a collaborative group presentation, you are now each doing them independently, and you're doing them in 5-minute segments, okay? And post those to YouTube. Give me the YouTube link, and then I go ahead and post those on Converge. Anyway, I've enjoyed them. Thank you for doing them. I appreciate it. Let's see. There was one more. I think there was one more bit of business, and I can't remember what it is offhand right now. It's getting later. It's now 9:25 on Sunday evening, and I'm getting a little bit more loopy, I suppose. Yeah, the older you get, these hours shouldn't be that difficult, but it's already approaching my bedtime, and I promised my wife that we would watch a Downton Abbey episode later on. So I've got to get through this and get going and doing some other things. All right, so here's what I want to do. The topic is secular existentialism, and I'm going to bump to this slide, which I know you guys are aware of. We've seen this in class before. Of the philosophies, we've probably dealt with existentialism more than anything else. So I don't feel the need to run through too much of this yet again. That would be, I think, a little bit redundant. But just as a reminder, as you're watching this screen, you see what we have talked about before, the whole concept that Sartre introduced of existence preceding essence. We've talked about that almost ad nauseum, actually. But the whole notion of freedom and responsibility being important for individual choice, we've talked about that. This whole slide, I think we've gone through a couple of times. So the bottom element, the whole idea that we are not to be ruled by external confining forces that oppress our lives and infringe upon our freedoms, that we are meant through this secular existential format, we are meant to figure out and define our own existence ourselves, and that we do that through our experiences, and especially this notion that experience is the key. Action, experience and human action, doing things, are really important for the secular existentialist in the mold of both Sartre and Camus and de Beauvoir and some of the other famous existentialists. So truth is not found through that abstract element. It is much more associated with our individual actions that we put in play. And of course, the famous phrase that I've put forward in class a couple of times is that essentially we are what we do, hearkening back to using the example of Batman Begins and Bruce Wayne and his famous growl at the end, where he talks about he is what he does, right? So we've talked about those things. We flip to this. We've also dealt with the comparative framework between the Christian view and the existentialist view. So you see, just once again, something that you're pretty well aware of by now. These are just reminders of where we have been. So I posted a couple of things on the Converge page. First of all, I hope you at least get a chuckle out of the existential comics I keep posting on there. The one for Monday the 6th, so the one for when you see this, it'll be the 6th probably. So the one for tomorrow is from the existential comics piece is about Camus trying to define himself as a hero, this absurd hero. And it's just tongue-in-cheek, kind of funny, but that's on there just for your enjoyment. I don't expect that that I will be testing you guys on the existential comics, but I put that on there. Two films I want to mention in just a few minutes that I want to spend a couple of minutes on anyway. But before that, I want you to be aware of two other posts. So as we think about existentialism, and we think about how it plays out for us in pop culture, we've primarily been focusing on films. Occasionally I've mentioned a television show or two, but in this case, I wanted you to be aware of how it certainly can be brought to the forefront through music. And I realize I'm somewhat dating myself here as far as my music interests. First of all, I was raised in an environment where various aspects of broadly speaking classical music, especially from the Baroque period, that's one of the things that I've enjoyed. And I played piano and violin growing up and still do. So I think that's true that I have that association. But if I attach myself to any other genre of music, it happens to be kind of the classic rock genre, going back to the 60s and 70s and some into the 80s as well. But so I grew up and really became a musical disciple, if you will, of the Beatles. And so I just couldn't resist posting a Beatles song. It's one of the more famous songs. It's called Eleanor Rigby. And what I did was I found a YouTube post that shows you. So I wanted you guys to be able to connect with the lyrics visually. So there's a video, but also it has the actual lyrics of the song playing, framed for you as you're listening to the tune. So I posted that. I also posted a not recent, but at least more recent than the Beatles, one of the more famous songs, probably the most famous song by the Seattle-based grunge band Nirvana, Kurt Cobain and all that. Very interesting musician, by the way. And so I posted their song Smells Like Teen Spirit on the Converge page as well. And what I would like you to do, because I don't want to steal their thunder and I don't want to do too much of your work for you in this case, because I would rather have you just kind of go in cold on these. And I want you to listen as you're watching this screen right now, right? As we think about what existentialism aims to tackle. I want you to listen to those, listen and watch those two songs. And I want you to be asking, what are the existential frameworks that are being wrestled with in these particular songs? The Beatles song, Eleanor Rigby, I think will be a little bit more obvious. And the Nirvana song, I think purposefully is a little bit more abstract in this regard, but it does actually deal with some very interesting existential themes. Kurt Cobain was a very tragic individual in many respects, but he was also brilliant, and he wrestled with some very deep notions in his music and deserves credit for that. So I want you to look at those and to kind of jot down some things for yourselves. I'm not sure exactly what I'll be doing yet, but I will likely draw from maybe one of those songs for the final exam. I'm not sure which one, or maybe I'll do both. I'm not really sure, but I do want you to actually spend some time on those. Okay, so back to the two films. For starters, I should mention the group that's posting, or the members of the existential group are posting videos for you guys on a film called Christopher Robin, came out a few years back. Ewan McGregor is in the title role as an adult Christopher Robin, and honestly, I swear to you, I think that the film could have been titled, maybe should have been titled, Christopher Robin's Existential Crisis. And I think if you haven't seen the film, I would highly recommend it. It's very well done. It's endearing. The animals at first kind of seemed, because they're kind of live action, right? So Pooh Bear is a live action, Pooh Bear and Eeyore and Piglet and the rest is live action. Initially kind of creeped me out, to be honest, but I adjusted pretty quickly, and actually it's a very well formulated movie. I just want you to be aware that this is why I wanted the group to wrestle with this one. I like what they've done. I think you'll enjoy each of their 5-minute segments. The other two films I posted on the Converge page, I want to just deal with for a few minutes, and then I guess we'll call it good for this particular Zoom lecture. The first film that I want you to be aware of is, that I posted anyway, the film that I think is actually very brilliant. It's one of the most thoughtful and well-designed visual set pieces of the 21st century when it comes to not only sci-fi broadly, but also in dealing with ideas. And existentialism is at the heart and core of this film. And I'm referring to a film that's called Ex Machina, is the way it's pronounced. It looks like Ex Machina, but that's incorrect. So it's a Latin phrase, and it simply means the machine. So Ex Machina is a film that frames existentialism very cleverly. And in the film, the characters that we learn about are all in their own way actually wrestling with identity, wrestling with who they are and what makes them human, and what human beings should value. The Oscar Isaac character, the very eccentric Oscar Isaac character, is the inventor, right? His character is the inventor of this AI that we meet during the film. The Caleb character is also is really kind of our key focal point, and he's brought out to this remote location in Alaska to meet with this inventor, and discovers that that Oscar Isaac's character has invented AI, and has created. Initially, we are only told that he's created this AI in the form of this android named Ava, who's played by Alicia Vikander in the film. And through the course of the film, we are introduced to, first of all, the concept of the Turing test, which is meant to provoke this response. We're meant the Turing test was essentially designed to prove artificial intelligence by this interaction where the AI has this self-awareness, this self-realization. And actually, it's a real test, by the way, so that's not made up for the film. That's an actual thing. And in the film, the Caleb character is brought on board, and he is supposed to be interacting with Ava. Only it's kind of a reverse Turing test, because she already knows that she's an android, and she knows that Caleb is a human being, and yet the test is to see, how self-aware she actually is, and whether she can behave like a human being or not. And the link I posted actually just deals with their initial contact. Caleb meets Ava, and they're asking each other very simplistic questions. And if you actually watch the full film, you see that these questions of being and what makes us human, and who has the right to determine humanhood, right? Who has the right to determine whether a life form is more valuable because they are flesh and blood and born, or whether a life form that is constructed and created like this machine, whether that has equal value. These things come clashing together throughout the course of the film. And it's also, just a great sci-fi film in the sense that, you have these questions being thrown around, and like any good sci-fi film, you're expecting the doom to come at some point. And I'm not going to spoil every part of this for you, but let's just say Ava is not happy with her creator. She's not happy simply being this machine that lives in this bunker, this complex below ground in Alaska somewhere. She wants more, and so she goes about trying to make that happen, and brings us to the culminating point of the film. Just a pause button here for you. I would say, so there, I think it's very carefully and contextually done, but there is some nudity in the film. Again, the way it's constructed makes sense, but I want you to be aware that there is some nudity in the film, and I don't want you to be caught off guard by that. So if you ended up watching that movie, that would just be something to be aware of. Powerful film, very, very much framing this notion of, freedom and individual determination of meaning, and the whole concept of how do I understand myself? What am I? Who am I? How do I construct my own value? Do I allow an external source? For Ava, that external source is the man who created her, played by Oscar Isaac. Do I allow that external source to define me, or do I get to, in a very real sense, define my own essence, define my own self, define my own value? So it's a very existential film. The other film that I want you to be aware of is profound, and it's actually it's a very deep and complex film, and maybe at some level a little bit tough for some to watch. It's a gangster film, but it's not a uber violent gangster film. We're not talking about Goodfellas here, okay? The Scorsese film Goodfellas. The film that I'm referring to that I posted 2 links on is called Road to Perdition by a filmmaker named Sam Mendes. And it's a phenomenal film. It deals with the love between sons and fathers. It deals with fallenness at a very fundamental level. It deals with the violent world that we live in and all of the complex relationships that exist in our lives. It does this in a number of very interesting ways. And in the film, this is all shown through the lens of primarily this father and son, these 2 characters, Michael Sullivan, played by Tom Hanks, and his son, Michael Jr., played by Tyler Hoechlin in the film. And they come in, they share an experience in this film out of necessity because of the fact that there are some murders that take place. So I won't go into all the details, but Michael Sr., so Tom Hanks' character, his wife and his son, which would mean that it's Michael Jr.'s mother and Michael Jr.'s brother, they are murdered by one of the very men that Michael Sr. works for. So Michael is kind of a hitman for a gangster who lives in Rock Island, Illinois, about an hour or so west of Chicago. And so he's kind of an extension of the Al Capone organization, we're meant to believe. And once this murder takes place, the father and his son are kind of on the run for the rest of the film, trying to stay alive, but also to expose the gangster, the son anyway, the son of a gangster who has committed this crime. The son, by the way, is named Connor Rooney, and he's played by Daniel Craig before he took on the role of James Bond. So it's a much younger version of Daniel Craig. And Daniel Craig's father, this gangster boss in Rock Island, Illinois, is played by the great Paul Newman. It's one of his very last film roles before his death. Now, I'm not going to spoil all the plot lines. First of all, I would just say that from a cinematography perspective, from a production perspective, it's one of the most gorgeously shot films you'll ever see. And the integration of the film score is just off the charts. Thomas Newman was the composer who did the film score, and it's just hauntingly beautiful. It's a very, very effective integration of film score music. But beyond that, these existential themes you will see come to the forefront. And young Michael begins by having revelations about who his father really is, right? So his father seems like just a normal, for the most part, kind of a normal family man, but through the early course of the film, Michael Jr. is exposed to the realities of his father's work and the work that his father does for Mr. Rooney. And that kind of sets things in, sets the whole plot line in action. These questions of identity are at the center of this film. And Michael Sr., the Tom Hanks character, is clearly struggling with his own choices. He felt as kind of an orphaned youth that he had no choice but to accept the charity of Mr. Rooney when he was a younger man, and he's very grateful for having a life. And yet he clearly is confronted by a fair amount of guilt that he has lived a life of extreme violence in service to this gangster. And his son, so the young Michael Jr., is concerned about his father's life choices and his career and what he does as a mafia hood. And yet Michael Jr. loves his father, and he actually respects his father to a very real degree. And their relationship is shown, these tensions, but also these warm moments between them are actually very telling and central to the film. So the film, I posted two clips. There's an essential clip that the first one where Michael Sr. confronts his former boss, Mr. Rooney, in the basement of this Catholic church. And they have this interesting conversation about the choices that they have made in their lives. And it's also constructed beautifully because they're in this church basement. And I don't know that I would have expected you guys to figure this one out on your own, so I'm just going to mention it. They're in this church basement, and as you will see when you watch the clip, they're having this conversation about their choices and the fact that the life they live, that they have chosen to live, will bar them from heaven. Or at least it will make it more difficult to get there. And it's a really interesting framework because in the background you hear these angelic voices upstairs in the church, but of course overhead above them. And whether this is supposed to be hell or purgatory, my suspicion is that Sam Mendes, he kind of indicated this in one of his interviews, that this was meant to be a representation of purgatory. But it's fascinating because you have these angelic voices who are singing beautifully in the distance. You can hear them as these two gangsters are talking about all the violent realities of their lives and what they have done and what they're ashamed of, clearly. And there's a famous line in the film where the Paul Newman character says, "One thing I know, none of us will see heaven." And Michael responds by saying that Michael could, his son could, Michael Jr. could. It's a powerful moment. The other clip that I showed is the very end of the film. I want you guys to note that I said you should probably start that clip at about the 6-minute mark because it's a 9.5-minute clip or so. And I really just wanted you to see the tail end where, sorry for the spoiler, but there's a spoiler alert here. Michael Sr. doesn't make it through to the end of the film. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but I have to tell you that. And Michael Jr. reflects on, he survives their ordeal. He reflects on everything that he witnessed. He reflects on who the complex man that his father was, a violent man, but also a loving father and a committed father in many ways. He reflects on his flawed father, and he talks about his own kind of existential conclusions that he reaches about making a choice that is very different. He actually winds up in the film by saying, "I saw that my father was afraid that I would follow the same path, that I would make the same existential choices that he made, the flawed choices that led to his ultimate demise and cost him so much." And then he softens that by saying, "But I'm making a different choice." And there's this redemptive moment in the film where you realize that Michael Jr. is not going to become what his father had been. And even though he loves his father, even though you recognize that love was profound and real between father and son, you're also very grateful for the fact that Michael Jr. has actually learned some valuable things, and he's making this existential choice. It's a powerful film. Again, it is a gangster film. There are moments of violence. It is an R-rated film, after all. But again, it's just not the same as some of the other R-rated gangster films that are out there. It is poignant. It is hauntingly beautiful, as I said. The music is wonderful. The performances are off the charts. And I'm telling you, the shot framing in the film with Sam Mendes and Conrad Hall, his cinematographer, are just, it's a masterpiece of cinematography. So I would highly recommend the whole film to you, of course, but watch those two brief clips. I think they'll be very instructive as you try to spot some of these existential themes. All right, guys, I will be posting another Zoom lecture for Wednesday, April 8th. So be looking for that. But for now, I hope you're doing well. I miss you, miss being around you. I am praying for you. Please be praying for me. I think we're pretty healthy and seem to be doing okay. But this health crisis seems to be heading towards or nearing its apex, and there's an awful lot of anxiety, ridden news out there. I've tried to minimize my intake because it can be actually be too anxiety ridden, and I don't want to go there if I don't have to. But I'm trying to remain aware and yet also maintain some semblance of peace in the Lord, which is very quite apropos, especially since today happened to be Palm Sunday, and we're heading into Easter week. So I will continue to pray for you. I miss all of you. I miss all of my students more than I can possibly express, to be honest with you. But know that you are delights to me. I appreciate you. I appreciate the work you're continuing to do under difficult circumstances. Just God bless you all, and I will connect with you via a Zoom lecture again for Wednesday. Okay? See ya. Bye-bye.